Hey guys, it's coming in my review for the first 3 episodes of Season 5 of Better Call Saul, Season 5, Episode 1, Magic Man, Season 5, Episode 2, 50% off, and Season 5, Episode 3, The Guy for This. I figured that because there's been 3 episodes already, I might as well just do a review of all 3 of them in one video, just because it's kind of tedious to do 3 separate videos and things like that, I'm going to be doing it in the style that I do with most catch-up TV reviews where, I talk about each episode for a little bit individually and all that kind of stuff. But without wasting any time, we're just going to get right into the season. I got a lot to really say. This season is already firing on all cylinders. It's definitely going to be a very eventful season for sure. So let's just waste no time, starting off with Episode 1. And I'll just say right off the bat, this premiere was, I think, the best one the Better Call Saul has maybe ever done. There's so much that went on in this episode, and yet still it's, setting up a lot of the season, but there's so much going on with these characters, the way they're shifting, the different places that we're going with this show. I mean, we're getting some really juicy stuff, and I really did love it for sure. I think the first thing I want to talk about, though, in this episode is the Gene flash forward, which I don't usually spend a lot of time on. The only one I really did was Season 3, but I have to say, I think the one we got in this episode was probably the most crucial yet, not just because it was the longest one. I mean, we've never had a flash forward that goes on this long before. Literally the first, 9 minutes of this episode are a flash forward. But I also feel it's definitely the most integral for what's going on with Gene's character because, as we know, for a while, he's gotten the sense that he's been followed. He's gotten the sense that he can't really keep up this identity anymore. But nowhere is that confirmed more than the scene where literally these 2 people recognize him as Saul Goodman. They want him to do the catchphrase and everything, and he's not about it. He's trying to get away from that identity. And remember, Saul does not know what happened at the end of Breaking Bad. Maybe he saw it on TV and things like that, but he knows that he is still very much a crooked lawyer in that way. He knows that he still worked with a lot of criminals, so he's trying to do what he can to evade that situation. And I like that at the end of this flash forward, he realizes he can't just have Ed the Disappearer helping him out. He needs to do this on his own. This is something that he needs to get himself out of, and I don't really know how that's all going to go, but I would not be surprised if next season, considering it's the final season, we do actually get to see a full episode flash forward. I do think the show is obviously going to end with the flash forward, but I do think we're going to get an entire episode's worth of what's really going on here, because now we have a much clearer idea of what this story is all about. You have someone like Gene who's been living this very humdrum sort of, repetitive lifestyle with him in the Cinnabon and things like that. Now, and he's been able to do this for a while. He's been able to, keep up this facade of him just being this, this man who was kind of like Walter White almost, where he was living just this very sort of boring lifestyle, but in reality, he has been hiding, and now it's finally starting to crumble, and I really like the way things are going there, and it also is a really good parallel to where Jimmy currently is in, of course, Better Call Saul, because where Jimmy is right now, things are really not starting to crumble for him, but they're crumbling for him in a negative way, in the sense that he is starting to lose touch with himself. Not just starting, he has completely lost touch with himself at this point, because he's convinced Kim that, this is absolutely the right thing for him to do. And I like the way that he kind of has Kim wrapped around his finger at this point, that you can tell Kim is not okay with what he's doing. I mean, even when he tells her and rationalizes why becoming Saul Goodman is a good idea, she's still not about it. She's like, I don't like that idea. I don't like you becoming Saul Goodman. She just is not at all for this idea, and so I love the way things are going here, where he is really starting to think that, this is his way of abandoning the McGill name entirely, which, again, isn't necessarily a bad idea. Obviously, we know where it's going to lead him, so we know nothing good is going to come from it, obviously, but Jimmy's initial reasoning does make a lot of sense. He's had nothing but sorrow with the McGill name. There's nothing good that's come from it, and no one's going to remember him as a good lawyer. They're just going to take pity on him because he was Chuck's brother. So in this way, he's able to divorce that from himself entirely. He's able to take that out of the equation, and people are going to be able to take him more seriously. And when he puts on this, more talkative and flamboyant persona that we're used to seeing, it makes a lot more sense as to why he's so good at what he does, because he's just able to trick people into thinking that. And I really like the way that whole situation is being played out. But then, of course, where Kim ends up going at the end of the episode, you really are feeling her frustration. I mean, she's gotten played by Jimmy about 3 times now, and this time was something that she knew she could have stopped. She knew exactly what he was doing, and yet she still gave in. And I like the fact that it's really starting to get to her. That scene at the end where she's throwing the suitcase in frustration, you're just as frustrated with her because you know exactly what Jimmy is doing. And I will say, I do think the season is going to end with Kim officially leaving Jimmy. I don't think it's going to be the final season. I know a lot of people think that's going to be the case, but I really do think, considering the way things are headed right now, I would not be surprised if this is the season where she just up and leaves, because it's really getting to a point where she just cannot handle this anymore, and I can't say I really blame her. And I thought that was just, Ray Seehorn's acting was just so good in that scene. I love the way that was played out for sure. I thought they did a really great job with that. And then contrasting Jimmy's fake persona of Saul, who's trying to get Huel Babineau out of this situation, and, Huel keeps calling him, like, the magic man and things like that. It just shows how different that relationship really was from what we thought it was in Breaking Bad. There's nothing genuine about this at all. I think Jimmy does generally want to help him, but his main concern is about trying to, scheme his way into this situation, make sure that his clients win in that way. He wants to be looked at as a good lawyer. His image is what's most important right now, and you definitely do get to see that. And it's sad to see, because we do know that Jimmy is a genuine person, but that genuine side of him is slowly being stripped away, and we're really starting to see that here. And, moments like Kim giving him that suitcase, of him being JMM and how he's still going to carry it. Yes, you can tell he definitely does still have it in him, but his main concern at the moment is to become something that he's absolutely not, become a new identity entirely, and we know where that gets him. We know the path that sends him down, and it's only a matter of time before he's getting there. He's very, very close to getting there, and it's very sad to see for sure. So that's everything going on with Jimmy really in this episode. But the stuff with Mike and Nacho especially is just as interesting. I'll just say right now, the inclusion of Lalo Salamanca has made that storyline so much more riveting, because we have someone that actually is a threat to Gus, which we've never really seen in this show before. We've never really seen in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul someone that actually is a legitimate threat to Gus. We've had people that seem like threats, and then Gus is able to make things go his way. And do I think that Gus is going to make things go his way? Well, I mean, Lalo's not in Breaking Bad, so I think there's a reason for that. But we also know that Lalo is clearly up to no good. There's something that he causes that, just utterly frightens Saul in that way. So we know that's going to lead to something. And just the scene alone where he's talking to, like, Nacho and Victor about, like, do you know who Werner is? Do you know who Mike is? And the fact that they can't give him an answer, I mean, you just really feel his menace there. But then when he realizes that there is this competing, drug cartel that isn't the Salamancas, you can really feel the rage within Lalo. And the fact that Gus wants to do some of this immediately really makes me worried as to where this is actually headed, as to where they're actually going with this. And I just, the rivalry heating up between them is going to be so good. I cannot wait to see how that whole thing goes down, especially the scene where he confronts Gus and how, like, he wants to do some of this immediately. He's not wasting any time. This is a problem, and this feud is going to get ugly very fast, and I can't imagine where that's going to end up going. And again, it helps that we know so little about Lalo that makes this so riveting in that way. All we know is that Lalo ends up, really fucking things up. He's going to do something really bad. I do think he's going to probably end up killing Nacho in the end. I think that's what's going to end up happening. But we'll have to see the way things really do end up playing out there. And then with Mike, throughout this entire episode, it's really tragic with him because you really do feel his regret about killing Werner. Werner was someone that he had a genuine relationship with, and you can tell that he is really regretting it, especially when, you know, when you see one of the characters come up to him and tell him that, like, you know, oh, Casper, that was the character. When Casper comes up to him and says that Werner was 50% of who he was, I mean, you can really feel how this has affected Mike. This is really made him, you know, this has put him in a very dark place. And Mike was already in a place where, you know, he doesn't like to talk about his emotions. He's very closed off in that way. But you can really feel how regretful he is of that. And I do think, even though Mike never really wavered against Gus, we do get to see here, he's always doubted him in that way. He's always seen just how inhumane Gus is. When Gus shows a total lack of care for Werner being killed, all he cares about is the fact that things went his way, that their plan has actually worked out in that way, that there's no holes or anything. You know, Werner's wife is fine, everything's great. You know, he's been able to concoct this plan, and you can tell that Mike is just not okay with it, similar to how Jimmy is tricking Kim into doing things that she's not okay with doing. So I do really like the contrast here. I think they're doing a really excellent job with that, and I just cannot wait to see where all these storylines are going to go. Everything about this episode, though, they really ramped up the suspense. They really ramped up the tension of everything that's going on. Every storyline at this point is just the most riveting it's ever been, where things are going with Kim, where things are going with the whole feud between Lalo and Gus. I'm just really excited to see the way things all do go down. Even the flash forward with Jean, I'm really interested as well. There's so many things that this premiere did so well. It does what a great premiere should do. It lays out a general outline of what the season is going to be, but also gives you a really good idea of that this is going to be a very rough season. This is going to be very hard to watch for sure, because we really are seeing the unraveling of many of these characters, and considering that quite a handful of them we don't really know the fates of, that's what makes this even harder to watch, and I thought they did a really good job with that in this episode. So overall, I definitely really enjoyed this episode quite a bit, and so I'm going to give this episode of Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 1, Magic Man, overall in A. Alright, so now I'm going to be reviewing episode 2, 50% off, and holy shit, this episode was insane. Now, obviously, the Jimmy and Kim stuff is still really great, but I want to focus mostly on the Nacho stuff in this episode, because this was such a great episode for this character. And Nacho's a character I feel like that's come a really long way. I remember back in Season 1, people just did not know if this character was really going to work. They didn't really know where they were going to go with him, but to see where he is now, I really love what they're doing with this character, because at this point, he knows about the feud between Gus and Lalo. He's very much caught in the middle of it, and he's basically working as a double agent now. He is simultaneously trying to get into Lalo's good graces to obtain information on the Salamanicas and everything that they're doing, but he also is trying to, you know, follow Lalo's orders at the same time, and you can already see how that's becoming a bit of a struggle for him, and I don't think any scene shows that better than that whole scene where, you know, they're staking out at that one house, and, you know, the police are coming after them. That whole scene was straight up like Breaking Bad. It was absolutely nuts when the police are, like, raiding their house, and Lalo's just so calm the entire time, and that's what's so, like, scary about Lalo, is that he's very similar to Gus. He doesn't seem to react to much. Not much really seems to get to him in that way, and it's really kind of hard to watch, and I thought they did that scene, I was just so riveted. It's easily one of the most intense scenes we've had in this show in terms of action-wise, and I was just so impressed with the way everything really went down there. That was such a riveting sequence, and I thought they did such a excellent job with that. But we also do get to see a lot more of Domingo, who of course is eventually going to become Crazy 8, what's happening with him, how, you know, he's in this whole situation where he's the one that has the drugs, and basically Lalo's really worried that he's going to end up talking in jail and things like that, and so we have this whole situation going down, and I like the moment where we find out how he got his name as well. I thought that was a really effective scene, and I thought they did a really good job with that. But this episode also is really about those two storylines finally coalescing in that way. We're finally starting to see the Jimmy storyline, basically converge with the Nacho story, which is something that we have seen before, but these two have not talked for a while. On the Jimmy side of things, he's still doing his whole Saul Goodman routine, and there's that great scene with him and Kim, and, they're going to this house that's for sale, and at first she seems really on the fence about it, but he seems to really get her into, becoming more on board with them potentially having this house one day and things like that. And, I really did appreciate seeing that. But we also, again, can see that she's very adamant about not wanting to continue this line. She doesn't like the manipulating. She has a much more straightforward approach. And I think the show's doing a really good job with showing that Kim is good-natured, but not trying to turn her into, like, a Mary Sue or something like that. She is someone that is very loyal to Jimmy, and because of that, that is, I think, her becoming her biggest weakness. Jimmy's really kind of becoming this burden to her in that way, and I think we're really starting to see what's gonna end up happening there. I don't think anything good is really going to come from that, honestly, and the whole scene with Jimmy where, he's back at the office, and he has that really great exchange with Howard where, he realizes that he's Saul Goodman now and things like that, and, Howard invites him to have lunch, which you can tell really scares Jimmy. He doesn't want anything of his past to come back to haunt him. He wants to be able to abandon that. So I don't really know how that whole situation's going to go, but I do like the way the show is still finding ways to use Howard, even though Chuck is still not on the show. They're still finding things to do with Howard's character, and I hope they continue to do that because I do want to see more with him. Like I said, my only flaw in Season 4 is I just didn't feel they gave him enough to do, really, and I hope we get to see more of that in this season for sure. But the scene, of course, where he's with Erickson, who was already kind of onto him, and they're stuck in that elevator for like 20 minutes and things like that, and it seems like they kind of have like this understanding of each other as the way things turn out, and the way he's kind of able to gain her trust, but then we realize that it's kind of been a scam all along. It just shows how good Jimmy has become at conning people, but also how he really can't stop doing it. It seems like everyone that he is approaching now, he's just conning in that way, and that's really, I think, his biggest flaw, is that he doesn't seem to know how to stop there. But of course, then we get to the end where, he's finally approached by Nacho. These two, you can tell, haven't spoken for a while, and he's in a hurry to get out of there. You can tell he doesn't really want to have this interaction with him, but Nacho's gesturing like right at the ice cream that he drops on the sidewalk, and that's enough of a way to lure Jimmy into his crosshairs, and it seems like he's finally going to he's finally going to have to work with them again. And I think when Saul talks about how, Lalo, and I know I keep bringing this up, but how Lalo did something that really scared him, I think this is how we get to that. And I think that thing is Nacho. The way that this is going for Nacho, the way that he literally is stuck in the middle here working for both of them, I feel like Lalo's going to end up sacrificing him. I just don't see this going very well for him at all. It's going to be tragic to watch, but the way they're setting it up is so great. The momentum on the show is fantastic, and I love what they really are building to here. And we also do get a scene with Mike in this episode that I did think was very effective. The whole thing with him and Kaylee where, these two already have a really great relationship and things like that, and, we're used to those scenes being a lot of fun, but to actually see Kaylee have Mike kind of lash out at her, which we're not used to seeing, was honestly kind of horrifying. And again, it shows what the emotional repression that Mike has been dealing with, what that is really doing to him. It is having a significant impact on him. You know, he can't really hide it any longer. And the problem is he doesn't talk to anyone. When Stacy's asking him, like, what went down, he doesn't tell her about it. And I think that's really what cements Mike's downfall. That is what's going to make him, again, into Mike the Cleaner that we know him as on Breaking Bad, is just his inability to want to talk about anything that actually is bothering him. And I think that really is a huge problem for sure. So yeah, there was a lot to really love about this episode. It was definitely a very heavy episode for sure, especially with all that nacho stuff. That one scene with the stakeout and things like that, and, you know, Crazy 8 getting arrested, and now they're going to have to deal with him in jail. We don't know what's really going to happen there. There's just, I have no idea where that's going to go. That whole thing is insane. I really only have one flaw with this episode, and that is the whole opening with those two guys who, I don't know about you guys, but they were eerily similar to Skinny Pete and Badger. I don't know if it was the beanie or whatever, but they very much reminded me of those two. I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but it very much seemed that way. I'm just not sure where that storyline is really going to go. I like seeing that Saul at this point has this huge, like, group of followers. Everyone just, like, really, adores him and things like that, because, again, his approach is much different than when he was Jimmy. It's far less genuine. It's far more like a regular salesman in that way, and that's something that are getting people on board, and they feel very confident of what's happening. But I wish we could have gotten a little bit more context as to what's really going on there. That's really the only thing that just didn't really work for me all that much in this episode. But other than that, I thought this episode was fantastic. I loved what they ended up doing with all the nacho stuff here. I think they're really leading up to something great. I can't wait to see where it goes in episode 3. So I'm definitely going to give this episode overall an A-. And now, guys, I'm going to be talking about the third episode, of course, being the guy for this, and holy shit, another incredible episode for sure, and a lot to really discuss here. There's a lot that goes on within this episode. I think the first thing I really want to talk about is how much Jimmy and Nacho's stories are really starting to converge here. I mean, at this point, Jimmy is very much, you know, he's getting in deep with Lalo and Nacho and all of them, and the conversation he has, yeah, it's really funny, and that's something I do like about the show, is that it always does retain its sense of humor, and that's something that Saul always did as well. He always cracked jokes and things like that, so it makes sense to definitely have that in there. I love the scene where, you know, he's jokingly talking about how, like, they're gonna make him eat condoms or something like that, and Lalo says that's gonna happen later. But basically, the intent is, yes, obviously they do want to get Crazy 8 out of jail, but they also want to get the DEA information on Gus's dead drops, because obviously Lalo wants to be Gus as his own game. He wants to know more of what's going on there. You know, he's starting to know more about the labs and things like that that are being built, so he really wants some information there, and I really love the way that Jimmy goes about this, specifically with Nacho, a character that, you know, he has had previous history with, but Nacho's a character that has very much changed, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but the scene with him and Crazy 8 was just an all-timer, I think, in terms of Better Call Saul. Not just because of Hank and Gomi being there, which they really did an excellent job of giving us everything we love about these characters, but also showing us who they used to be. Hank, this is back when he was overconfident. This is back when he was very, you know, he was very masculine in that way and things like that, and he was very brash with the way he went about things, and we haven't really seen that side of Hank in a while, but it was just so great to see. And Dean Norris and Stephen Michael Quezada, they did not miss a beat. They completely were, they returned back as these characters. They were completely convincing, and it was just, I can't believe that we're this far into the show. It really shows how little we have left to go, that we're now seeing Hank and Gomi. And when Hank mentioned Marie, I honestly almost teared up just knowing what ends up happening to Hank. And again, this is one of the reasons I'm really happy I watched Breaking Bad, because I feel like that scene would not mean nearly as much to me if I had not. But actually getting to see them, you know, seeing them handle this case, seeing them laughing at Saul and things like that, it just shows the kind of person that Hank used to be when he was much more confident, when he was just in a much better place in his life. And it's just tragic knowing what's going to happen there. But the way that whole scene goes down with, Saul basically manipulating them into eventually giving him this information and all that kind of stuff. And he does find a way for Domingo or Crazy to be released and all that stuff. And he does also get that information from the dead drop locations. It was really well played, and Jimmy's doing obviously a really good job with that. Like I said, he's really starting to get a handle on how to con people really well, and I think that's something that we're definitely seeing here. But the conversation that Nacho has with Jimmy was honestly really scary when he talks about how once you're in, and yeah, that's very much the case. Nacho's kind of in for life. We saw this happen with Jesse, with Walt. Once he was pulled in, he simply could not get out until everything was literally burnt to the ground except for him. He was always in that situation. And the same thing is happening with Nacho, but I have to say, I don't think things are going to end up, quite as happily as they did for Jesse with Nacho. And the conversation he has with his father, I think completely represents just how much he has changed as a character. It's a perfect reminder of what Nacho's life could have been. He could have just taken over his father's story, could have had a good relationship with him, but Nacho's father knows that something's going on. Nacho's father knows that he's involved in something really shady, and he wants no part of it. And it's just really tragic to watch because it reminds us of who Nacho used to be, the kind of character we started out with before he was involved with all this, before he was working for the Salamanicas and things like that. And the fact that he's gotten so deep into it with really no way out, and I really do feel he's going to end up becoming a liability to either Gus or Lalo, is just really tragic to watch. And especially that last scene with Gus where they do decide that they are going to give these dead drops, to Lalo, because you could see that, you could see that Tyrus was he was ready to just call it all off. He was ready to spill everything. But obviously, Gus wants things to go his way. And, if things are going the way they are, I do not think that Gus is going to kill Lalo before killing Nacho. I do think Nacho is very much on the chopping block. And I continue to get worried about him. This entire season, you're probably going to hear me be worried about Nacho. Every single episode, I'm going to be worried that something bad's going to happen to him. I feel like I've been that way for a while now when it comes to Nacho. Back in season 2, you guys can see I thought Nacho was going to die. Or in season 3, when he did the assassination attempt on Hector, I thought he was going to die. But this season, I'm really confident in him dying. I really do think that's going to happen just because it really seems like we're getting to that point. The fact that we're focusing on him a lot more this season, it just seems to make sense that that's where they're heading, and I can't imagine how that's going to go. But going back to Jimmy, the other thing that this episode really does show is that he is really starting to embrace this Saul personality too, in the worst way possible. He's straight up lying to Kim. He's not telling her what's going on at all. He's hiding tons of stuff from her. And you can see it's having a real impact on Kim, but his tactics are already rubbing off on her. When she's in that whole situation at Mesa Verde, and you see all these cases that's going on and how overwhelmed she is and things like that. And, Kim is someone who's always been a really great lawyer. She's always done a good job. So to see her really cracking under pressure and the fact that she can't seem to win over this one guy, Mr. Acker, was just really sad to see. And to be honest, I couldn't tell if the story that Kim was telling was real or not. I kind of feel like it wasn't. I feel like she is actually starting to manipulate people. I feel like she is starting to try to do that because Mr. Acker seemed to see through her bullshit. He didn't believe a word that she was saying, and when he closed that door on her, it was just absolutely devastating knowing that things were not working out. And yes, the scene of them throwing beer bottles is a nice scene because you do still see them interacting, but again, I would attest most of this to what Jimmy has done to her. He's really making her self-destruct in that way, and he's really starting to become a toxic presence in Kim's life, and it's very saddening to see because these two were once the hopeful couple of Better Call Saul. There were so many things that, if Jimmy's life had turned out a lot differently and he had a more loving relation with his brother, I do think these two could have gone the distance. I do think things would work out for them, but I think Kim's just at a point where things just keep going wrong for her, and she's just going to continue to down spiral throughout the season, and it's going to be very hard to watch. Also down spiraling, though, is Mike, who has one of the most, probably one of his most devastating scenes in this episode, where he's at this bar, and it's the bar that Werner's father had worked on, basically. You know, he takes down this postcard of the opera house because Werner's father had, like, worked there and things like that, and this gang of thugs is, like, robbing him, and he just breaks the leader's arm. And so this is really starting to show how desensitized he is becoming to all of this. The fact that he's keeping it inside, it just isn't affecting him anymore. And again, knowing where Mike is going, it's just really hard to watch, and I feel like Mike is just going to continue to down spiral throughout this entire show, and it's no wonder why he's going to end up working for someone like Gus, who is just as desensitized to all of this. And even though Mike, you can tell already, is seeing through Gus a bit, it does make sense that where he's headed, he's going to be, you know, Gus is going to be the only person that he can really work for, just because of his anger issues and things like that. So overall, I thought this was another really fantastic episode. They're moving some characters in some really interesting directions. And the one thing I can say about all three of these episodes is that they are not wasting any time this season. They're getting right into this storyline. They're really getting into the thick of things. And I feel like we're in for a very eventful season for sure. Not just because it's the penultimate season and season 6 is the final season, of course. And so we're really setting things in motion for that. But I feel like just the trajectory of all these storylines are really coming to, you know, their inevitable end in that way. You really do feel a lot of these characters starting to go down the worst paths possible. And so with that, I feel like we're going to get some really amazing stuff this season. I can't imagine how it's all going to play out. But characters like Nacho and Kim, I'm so worried for. Mainly just because they're not in the original show. Kim, I still contend that I think she's going to end up leaving Jimmy. I don't think she's going to commit suicide. I know a lot of people think that's going to happen. I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't see Kim doing something like that. I see her, you know, she's a strong woman, and I see her leaving Jimmy. I definitely see that happening. And then Nacho, though, I do very much think is on the chopping block. I think he's at a point where I just don't see how he can get out of this situation alive. He's so deep into it. The fact that literally, you know, Tyrus was already going to spill the whole thing is not a good sign for Nacho. He's already not doing a great job of trying to play both sides, and I don't really know how this is going to go for him, so I guess we'll just have to see the way that turns out. And then Jimmy and him really just becoming a master manipulator in the way he's able to con people. It's really kind of hard to watch because, again, they're taking something that was a lot of fun in Breaking Bad and really showing how this is the weakness of Jimmy. This is his fatal flaw in that way, that he's just becoming too good at it. And I do think that that is going to end up being the thing that is the downfall of him and Kim's relationship. We're already seeing it, and I feel like it's just going to get worse as the season goes on. But between that, you know, the cameo with Hank and Gomi, who I hope we see more of. I really hope this is not the end of us seeing those two in Better Call Saul, because it was just so cool to see them here. Get a Jesse or Walt cameos. Well, I don't think we're going to get a Walt cameo. I feel like that's just asking for too much. But Jesse, I could see happening at this point. Marie also I could see happening because Hank mentioned her, and I could definitely see them doing something like that. Hell, whoever thought Lydia was going to be in this show? So I feel like anything is possible at this point. I guess we'll just have to see the way things do work out. But I do hope we get to see Hank and Gomi more moving forward because I really do love both of those characters. But either way, guys, this was another really fantastic episode. I'm definitely going to give this episode a Better Call Saul. Season 5, Episode 3, the guy for this overall in A. And with that, guys, that's it. I am officially all caught up on Better Call Saul. I'm so happy about that because I've been behind for a very long time now, and I'm very excited to review every single episode this season individually. Definitely starting off with Episode 4 next week. Very excited to see how things do play out. But that's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys saw this season so far. Love your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.